more week of the regular season left, and some players are in prime position to build their Heisman resume. Some don't have as much runway. We're going to talk about all of it. Welcome into the Heisman Show, presented by Nissan, premier partner of the Heisman Trophy. Christine Williamson here, next to my bestie for the restie, Kelsey Riggs. What's good, girl?
Nothing. Excited to be here.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving week, rivalry week.
Yeah, good job saying
Thank you. I got that one out of the way, so now I don't have to say it again because it's a tongue twister every time.
It is, for sure.
But good to be here. And Christine, we had some kind of chaos this week.
Some things got mixed
We knew
up.
it was going to happen.
Right.
We knew that what we thought last week might not be what we think this week, and that is in fact what we're seeing now.
Yeah, I feel like things didn't look how we expected them to look, but it was a very interesting week in college football for sure. So let's look at the current Heisman odds, which look completely different than they did last week in some regards. CJ Stroud still leading the way, then Caleb Williams did a lot last week against UCLA. So what stands out to you after last week's action?
First of all, Caleb Williams, and we'll get into him a little bit more in the game he had, but how close now he has kind of narrowed the gap where we do kind of, it looks like now have two front runners until more madness happens this weekend, and that all changed. But Christine, to have Max on there and Jaden and Bo, and they weren't, not that they weren't in the conversation, but they definitely weren't front runners last week and as relevant, I think, pertinent to a lot of these conversations. So I think that's what stands out to me, and we're going to talk about it some throughout this show. I think that every week is so important right now almost more so than ever when there hasn't been a clear-cut favorite most of the season, especially in the last half of the season, because it matters what you do week to week more than ever, because I feel like everybody's going to be really impressionable. And if things are really, really good, then you can tick up. And if things take a little dip down, then guys are going to fall out of the mix.
A lot of recency bias for sure. I do want to mention the fact that Hendon Hooker at one point was the Heisman favorite, obviously suffered a torn ACL last week. That really sucks. So now no longer in the Heisman race, which just sucks because it was a good story. Tennessee was great. He was great to watch. Very exciting to watch. Obviously, he's 24 years old. So yeah, just good luck to him.
And he obviously did enough things throughout this season, Christine, where it's like, okay, he's still relevant, and there's still people that would have him in the conversation. But I think because we have such big games and such big matchups and such big conference championships coming, where a lot of these guys are going to be playing, that they're going to continue to skyrocket. And we're going to see somebody really just take hold of this at the end.
Right, exactly. Let's talk about some guys that could really take hold of this at the end. The game, okay? We have Ohio State playing Michigan. CJ Stroud, very inconsistent, I would say. We're going to talk about our Heisman list a little bit later, but last week wasn't very impressive, wasn't impressive against Northwestern. How much do you think is riding on this game against Michigan?
I think there's a ton riding on it, and not just for the Heisman, but for the college football playoff. These are, two teams that have great chances to be in the college football playoff, both of them, but also two players that have great chances to be not just sitting in New York, but winning the Heisman when it's all said and done. There's a ton riding on this game. And I would say, like, CJ Stroud definitely had those two games where he wasn't as consistent. But when you look at the overall body of work, I mean, there's a reason that he's still the front runner right now, because he has done so much for this Ohio State team. He leads in total PER and yards per attempt this year. And so he's been good for them. We've seen him continuously have games, Christine, where he just goes off and has four passing touchdowns. 100%. And so we know the talent that he has, but with that in mind, there's a ton that's riding on this game, not just for the Heisman, but also for the college football playoff, and that's what's going to make it so fun.
And if he doesn't play well, it could certainly hurt his chances
100%.
to be in the lead for the Heisman. Exactly, for sure. Let's talk about Blake Corum, because you were talking. I feel like you're about to bring him up, because obviously this is a huge game for him as well. How much do you think this could either help or hurt his Heisman campaign?
Same thing for him, Christine. And I think with him, what's interesting is how healthy is he?
Right.
Because you know that this is a game that you've had circled on your calendar for a long time as, hey, I want to get that Ohio State-Michigan game. He goes out last week, still has over 100 yards and has a great performance, tries to come back in and play, and he's not able to do it. So how healthy will he be, and is he healthy enough to go? And then also, okay, if you're healthy enough to go but you're not healthy, what does that do? Does it hurt you? Does it hurt your chances? Does it hurt your team? So I think that factors into it for sure. Obviously, he's a competitor. He wants to be out there playing in a game like this at the highest level. But this game has major implications for both of these guys and for both of these teams. And I hope that he's healthy, and I hope he's ready to go, because this is a big one.
Let's talk about Caleb Williams a little bit. We got to show some love to the USC quarterback, obviously first-year quarterback at USC. And we didn't know exactly what he was going to be doing this season, but what he did against UCLA last week was wild, and that was the game for him to do it too.
Yeah, I mean, just come on out and have a career-high day. Throws for nearly 500 passing yards in a ranked versus ranked opponent when you know how much is on the line. A-of-all, again, for him and for this team. There's a reason that he's in the Heisman conversation. I think he jumped up on a lot of people's boards, even higher, Christine, after that performance. He was so good. He's been so fun to watch all year, but after that performance, to have a career-high day and to be playing, talk about guys who are playing consistent, he is one of the players right now who is playing consistent, taking care of the football, also airing it out and coming up with some really big touchdown passes. That was a big performance for him. And if he can continue to do that, then I think he's going to continue. That stock is just going to continue to rise. And it doesn't have that much further to go.
Right, exactly. And he might also be one of the coolest guys in college football. I'm not joking. Like, go to his Instagram. He's literally one of the swaggiest people in college football. Yes. Okay. And we were talking about this yesterday on our show, Rankings Reaction on Tuesday nights. And we were talking to Sua Cravens, who played at USC also, and he was saying it's that NIL, man. Those players have so much more money than when he was at USC. So it's a little different. Let's continue the conversation about Caleb Williams and our Heisman contenders with our guy, Harry Douglas. HD, what's good? I feel like we haven't talked that much about Caleb Williams this season when it comes to Heisman conversation. So what do you think about his stock? How has he impressed you this season?
I really like where he's sitting at this moment right now. I think something that really put him over the edge was last week passing for 470 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game that they needed against one of their rivals in UCLA, a team that they actually share stadium with. So when I look at Caleb Williams, I look at a guy who's phenomenal, even dating back to his days at Oklahoma. And I still can't get out of my mind the instincts of this young man. Last year, when they had a 4th down and the running back had the football and was getting stopped, and he took it from him and went and picked up the 1st down. But you lead into this year now at USC, he's everything that this team needs him to be. Right, if it wasn't for Caleb Williams, I don't even think they'd be in the spot that they're in right now. He's going to take care of the football, 33 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. But he's also a guy that can utilize his legs and get this team out of trouble when needs be. And his supporting cast is phenomenal as well.
It's been great to watch his continued growth, and then also, like you touched on, HD, his continued success in a new system, or not necessarily a new system, but in a new place. Let's talk a little bit more about that game that we were just talking about this weekend. Ohio State and Michigan. Know that it's going to be a big one for both of these teams. And specifically, let's start with CJ Stroud. What do you think about what we've seen from him so far?
Well, when I look at CJ Stroud, he has the talent to be a starting quarterback right now. If he could have left last year, I think he'll be doing well in the National Football League. You just look at a guy like Justin Fields, and they're kind of built a little similar. Justin Fields probably a little bit more athletic than C.J. Stroud, but he can make every throw on the football field. I think coming into this year, he was expecting to have his #1 guy, Jackson Smith-Njigba, but he got hurt early on in game 1 against Notre Dame. So he had to build that rapport. Not that he didn't have it, but more so lean on who was going to be his #1 guy, right? That ended up being Marvin Harrison Jr., and he's been phenomenal. You look at the game against Northwestern, that's going to raise a lot of question marks in people's eyes. You look at the game last week against Maryland, if it wasn't for their defense and their special teams actually blocking a punt on the first series coming out of the second half, that game could have went a little different. I also look at the game against Iowa, and a lot of people are going to look at the score like, okay, Ohio State scored 50-something points, Iowa scored 10. That's the part that I'm looking at. They didn't surge until late into that ball game, and if Iowa had a blink of an eye, offense, any kind of offense, that game could have went differently than it actually ended up being. So I think you've seen some up and downs, not many downs, a lot more ups, but I think playing this game against Michigan, he can set the bar straight. We seen last year Bryce Young in the SEC championship game. Now, granted, whoever they play in the Big Ten championship game is not going to be anything that people can hang their hat on. But if he has a phenomenal game against Michigan and has that Heisman moment, he can really surge and be the guy.
I will say against Northwestern, I feel like he was kind of like the weekend, like literally could not probably even feel his face. So I give him a pass for that game. Maybe that's not fair. Maybe I shouldn't. Someone else that we're really looking forward to seeing in this game, hopefully, is going to be Blake Corum, and waiting to see about his availability and how he feels. HD, what's that like when you're trying to get healthy, you've gone through injuries, and you want to play in a game like this?
Well, I'll tell you, it's tough because knowing that you have a game coming up against your rival You just got hurt. One of the things he must do, though, is get around-the-clock treatment, right? And your adrenaline is going to be pumping. It was because he tried to go back in the ball game, wasn't able to go. But he's going to have to take things easy up until that day. Right now in warm-ups, you're going to have to test it out. It's going to be cold, and it makes it a little bit more difficult when the weather is a little breezy. I went through an ACL and all that in my career, and it really took me a year and some change to get back right. And every time cold weather is amongst my body, to this day, I feel that my ACL injury that I actually had. But I'm looking forward to seeing if he can actually go, because he's been phenomenal this year. He's everything when it comes to that Michigan football team. The last 8 games, he's had over 100 yards, 1,400 on the year, 18 rushing touchdowns, 5.9 yards per carry. I really have him very, very high in my Heisman watch. So looking forward to see if he's going to be able to play.
HG, you said every time it's cold, you feel your ACL injury. It was cold in Montana. Yeah. Is that the reason that you fell off of that ladder?
Oh, no.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Hey, well, I feel like you kind of set me up for it.
You may have things don't always go as planned, and then Mother Nature is definitely undefeated, because Mother Nature got me that day. It was a little too icy at the bottom, and I couldn't stick the landing. Listen, I'm not the first, I won't be the last.
We have to show Kelsey that that footage, just so that we can show her exactly what went down. Okay, let's talk about some dark horses. Max Duggan, Bo Nix. I know you've been hot on Bo Nix this season.
Yep.
Are there any guys, Jaden Daniels, that you feel like can really step up in these last few weeks of college football?
I actually think both of those guys, Max Duggan and Bo Nix, and I'll start with Max Duggan. I think you look at TCU football, if it wasn't for him, they'll probably have 3 wins right now. I think his defense has not picked him up. I think he's picked the team up in the defense week in and week out. Last week, late in that ball game, he didn't have Johnson. He didn't have his running back as well, but he found a way to win and will his team to a win. He's another guy that's a dual threat that can do it with his legs as well. But the way he's running Sonny Dykes' offense has been phenomenal. Do not count him out, because he has Iowa State, and that's a game that a lot of people should not ignore. But then you got the Big 12 championship game as well. Now, Bo Nix is a guy that can creep in there as well, even though he has 2 losses right now, because if they win, they're going to play in the Pac-12 championship game against USC and Caleb Williams. So now you're looking at a head-to-head matchup between those 2 guys. He has the game against Oregon State, who played USC very, very closely. The Civil War matchup, we know what that rivalry has meant to college football for years on top of years. So don't count out Bo Nix as well.
I love it, and it sounds like you're pretty high on some of these dark horses, so I'm curious. We're going to get to our top 5 in just a few minutes, but what are your top 5 candidates right now, Harry, for the Heisman?
Yeah, so for me, I have Caleb Williams as number 1. I look at his path right now. He had a hell of a game against UCLA. He's going to have a Notre Dame team that's going to be highly ranked this weekend, and they're surging and playing a good brand of football. And then he could potentially match up with Oregon in the Pac-12 championship game. So Caleb Williams, in my eyes, has the path to really take over this Heisman. Then I look at Blake Corum. The reason why I have him number 2 is because this offense revolves around him. Everything that Michigan wants to do from an offensive standpoint has to do with Blake Corum. We seen when he left the game against this past weekend how that team really struggled against Illinois. So I have him at number 2. Number 3, I have C.J. Stroud. And I think all C.J. Stroud has to do is have a hell of a game against Michigan, and he's in there. Number 4, I have Max Duggan, and number 5, I have Bo Nix.
I agree. No, I don't. Mine looks a little bit different, but HG, always great to have you and work with you. I will see you where it will be a little bit warmer than last week in Columbus, Ohio.
Get that ACL warmed up.
Yeah,
be
exactly.
Careful.
It'll be a little warmer, so hopefully you
Thank
won't
y'all.
fall. Okay, you guys can visit the virtual Nissan Heisman House to hang with your favorite players and mascots and get a chance to score exclusive Heisman Club NFTs. Head to theheismanhouse.com to get in on the action. All right, so what a difference 1 week makes. We made some Heisman predictions on our own front, like where we were with the top 5 Heisman contenders. And this is where we were last week. I had Hendon Hooker number 1. You had C.J. Stroud at number 1. And since then, a lot of things have changed. I mean, it's crazy because, like, college football wasn't that crazy last week, but some crazy things did happen.
Well, and we went into this saying the weeks the list from last week and the list from the very last time we do this will be drastically different. What you don't want to see is a list change like it has because of injuries. Because obviously with what happened to Hendon Hooker in the ACL, that changes things. Blake getting hurt changes things. That's what you don't want to see.
Right.
You knew there would be some chaos. You hate for it to be something like that. But yeah, my list looks very different. And I know yours does too because you were very high on Hendon Hooker last week.
Exactly.
Unfortunate to see what happened to him.
Okay, so you start us off with number 5. Who do you have this week?
Okay, Christine, I'm going to go with a new face for me at number 5, and I'm going TCU. We got to give them some love. Max Duggan, what has been doing this year. I'd love to give it to the kicker, honestly, Christine, because the way he came in and kicked that just on the fly when nobody thought there was going to be enough time to win that game, that was super impressive. But he's been impressive all year long. To have this team be undefeated, to have them win so many close games and a comeback game against this Baylor team. The stats aren't jumping off the page in a lot of these games for me, Christine, but I think there's something to be said just about a guy that knows how to win and knows how to, they have confidence in him. He's coming out, he's getting the job done, and for the most part, taking care of the football. Did have one interception this last game, but they've also beat some good teams. They beat 5 ranked teams, so it's not like they're going out and playing nobody. They're getting big wins, and he's definitely a big part of the reason why.
Yeah, exactly.
So hello to my Heisman board.
CFP race right now. Okay. I'm going to go with the guy that people have not been talking a lot when it comes to Heisman about.
Okay.
Because I feel like Bo Nix, Oregon quarterback, used to be Auburn quarterback, and there was a significant jump between what he was doing at Auburn and then what he's been doing at Oregon. Now, like you said with Max, the stats aren't necessarily jumping off the page, but if you were to give a Heisman to somebody with the most heart, especially in last week's game, I would give it to Bo. He went in and he was a game time decision. They didn't even know if he'd be able to play. He had an ankle injury and he decided to play and was able to still keep Oregon in the Pac-12 championship race. So I feel like the fact that they're able to do this, Bo Nix is a huge part of their offense, obviously, and is a huge part of the reason that they're in the position that they're currently in. So I'm putting Bo at number 5, and especially if they end up playing in the Pac-12 championship, he still has a chance. We've seen exactly how all of this stuff has changed over the last week. He still has a chance to be more in the Heisman conversation.
And I think that's super interesting. That's something that I kept in mind for some of these too, is like, what is the potential long term? Because Hendon's not in there for me anymore, Christine. Part of the reason because of the injury is because I think in a race as close as it is, and we've already talked about it some, I do think that recency bias matters. Because
100%.
right now, when there's not one runaway, when there's not two, yes, there are 2 front runners probably, but it's not set in stone. Right now, what you do week to week, it's like, how can you help me now? What are you going to do for me now? And I think people are going to continue to be influenced by that. I'm trying to still think big picture, which is why at number 4, I have Drake May. And I know a lot of people are off of Drake May after last week because it was bad. They have no business losing to Georgia Tech. It's the first game this season that he hasn't thrown for a touchdown and threw for barely 200 yards. Just the 4th time that he has even thrown under 300 all year long, and this was his worst game of the season, not completing a touchdown pass. They've struggled against Georgia Tech in the past, but for me, I'm going big picture with this because A of all, Christine, he's got an ABC game on Friday against NC State that people are going to be watching. If he comes out there and plays well, then people will take note. He also has a chance at Clemson in the ACC championship, which is going to have a lot of eyes too.
Exactly.
I also think about the body of work for the whole season. Last week hurt, so he drops down to me from 2 to 4, but this is a great quarterback. He's going to be not just a first-round draft pick. I think he's going to be a number 1 overall pick in the next couple of years.
I agree with that, even though I did take Drake completely off of my board.
You just said, the heck with it. We're done with you. You like to lose to Georgia Tech.
He's also young, and Georgia Tech,
but that's what's more impressive. Like, he's young.
That's true. But last week was rough. So,
it was rough.
And plus, I wanted to shake things up a little bit. Okay, so at number 4, I'm going Max Duggan too. Here's the thing. I talked a lot about this kid at the beginning of the season. We did on a lot of our shows because it was so impressive what he was able to do. He actually has only played about 10 games this season, right? So all of the stat lines, even though not very impressive, he's only played about 10 games. And his head coach, Sonny Dykes, believes that all of the things that he's doing on the field doesn't necessarily translate statistically. He's talking about his leadership, the decisions he makes on offense. So I feel like Max, obviously, there has to be a reason. And actually, Sonny Dykes did say, he was like, what would you chalk it up to? Is it God? Like, it has to be the quarterback of this offense, the leader of this offense. And so if he's going to attribute the fact that they're number 4 in the CFP right now to their quarterback, I'm going to trust Sonny Dykes, the head coach.
I like that.
Obviously. Right?
I like that pick, Christine. Okay. For number 3, I am actually going to go to Michigan, and I'm going with Blake Corum. And listen, he moves up 1 spot for me, which is interesting because he did. He still had a good game, rushed for over 100 yards and a touchdown, but was injured, tried to come back, wasn't able to do it. So he is a little bit of a question mark. If the guy can go at all without making it worse, we know we're going to see him play this week against Ohio State. There's no reason, there's no way that he's not going to want to be out there. I have a question about if he can't go, though, because like we've said, everybody's very impressionable right now. What have you done all year? Well, we quickly forget when there are other guys that are going to start shining, and if he's not able to go in this big game, obviously that would have major college football playoff implications, but also I think that could take him out of the mix a little bit. So right now, still been consistent, still been what Michigan really needs to get that ground game going, and one of the best to do it in all of FBS with those rushing touchdowns that he's had this year, Christine. But I'm worried about his health. So for now, 100%. He moves up 1 spot for me. And again, I think that's a byproduct of Hendon falling out with the ACL.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Blake Corum at number 3, too. Very concerned about his health. But we talked last week about what Jim Harbaugh said about his running back and how much he thinks he's a huge part of the reason that they've been successful this season themselves. So I feel like, once again, I'm going to trust the head coach. And if he thinks he should be in New York, especially if he's able to have a big game, if he does play against Ohio State, then I feel like he's still able to still have his Heisman moment and still able to play out the rest of the season. Then we'll see what he's able to do. But his health is obviously a concern.
For sure.
Who do you have at number 2?
I just want to say I'm sorry, Caleb Williams. I don't know why I had you at number 5 last week. I probably should have you at number 1 right now, but I'm trying not to be like too wide-eyed and just like hard eyes right now after that performance that you had because it was spectacular. And I've got Caleb Williams at number 2 this week. I mean, to come out the way he did against UCLA, Christine, 470 passing yards, accounted for over 500 yards of offense, 2 touchdowns, and did have that 1 interception, but for the most part has been taking care of the football lately and just playing well game after game. He can do a little bit of everything. He's thrown for the last 5 games, thrown for more than 350 yards and multiple touchdowns in the last 5 games. So the reason I'm saying I'm sorry is this was not a one-off. I mean, we knew what he's been doing this year, but he's consistently getting better, and he's got the platform to continue turning heads. And I think to make people say, okay, we've been talking about CJ Stroud all year as the favorite. Caleb has done more than enough to be the one who wins the Heisman at the end of the year.
I feel like I'm going to go on and tell you my number 1 because it is Caleb Williams. And I feel like he's been so consistent and so quietly consistent for USC. We didn't know.
5 last week too, right?
Right, exactly.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Very sorry. Very sorry about that. Yesterday I professed that I actually am a USC fan, so there's that too.
Oh, wow. Add that one to the mix of all the teams that Christine likes. Okay?
Exactly.
Okay,
but
good.
Caleb Williams, obviously we didn't know what he was going to do at USC. We saw glimpses of what he could do when he was at Oklahoma last year with Lincoln Riley. He goes over to USC and is obviously doing amazing things for them. So I'm going to just go on and tell you that that's my number 1. Who do you have at, or wait, no, I should go at my number 2. My number 2?
Yeah. I was going to say, I can probably guess who's not on your list right now.
Yeah, so I'm going with CJ Stroud at number 2. Now, last week I mentioned the game against Northwestern, which obviously we know there were so many other factors when it comes to the fact that he played so poorly.
How'd you do in the cold last week, by the way, when you were talking about
it? It was
him?
-4, Kelsey.
She was cold last week, too.
It was different.
You still, you perform differently when it's that cold.
So
it's like him against
he
Northwestern.
obviously leads in total QBR this season and has been, like we mentioned, very consistent. But he has had those games when they're bad. They're really bad. He had 76 passing yards in that game against Northwestern a couple weeks ago. And then obviously in Sunday's win over Maryland, he only had 1 touchdown. So not very consistent, especially in games where he should definitely be balling out. And I feel like that concerns me when it comes to him.
And that was part of the reason why I wanted to bring him to number 2. I have him at number 1. But also I tried, Christine, to think about the whole body of work, which is what I was trying to do. Because if I'm going to say, okay, Drake May, you get to stay on the list because you've been impressive all year long. CJ Stroud all year long has done everything that they needed. And even when he has a game like he did against Northwestern, even when maybe these stats aren't jumping off the page as much against Maryland this past weekend, he still finds a way, Christine, to be consistent enough to help them win. He is, what makes this engine go. And for me right now, the body of work for him is good enough for him to still stay at number 1. I just can't wait for this weekend to see how it all shakes out. I feel like it's setting up so perfectly, obviously, for the college football playoff, but also for also for rivalry week, which is very hard for me to say.
Yeah, it's hard for a lot of people.
And for that, but also just for the Heisman race. And to see really when the moment and the lights are the brightest, who is going to be able to answer that call. We saw Drake May fall off last week. We saw the other injuries, but this is it. This is the final weekend of the college football season. You know what's on the line, and it'll be really interesting to see which of these guys is able to answer the call in the national spotlight.
And I think the thing that's crazy is recency bias is playing so much into this. Like, even if you look at the odds, Hendon Hooker obviously injured, not able to play the rest of the season, drops out of the race completely. And it's just looking at what these players are doing in the month of November, where things really matter and things are on the line, because nobody other than CJ has really been in the lead all season. So it'll be interesting.
That's why I think it's cool, though. Max and Bo both were on our list last week, but all of a sudden things shake up. You still got a couple
also would like to point out that Stetson Bennett,
I know,
even though it's obviously Georgia's defense, but like even the fact that Georgia is #1 in the country and their quarterback isn't even on the list.
There's so many other good players.
There's so many other good players.
I feel the same way about LSU and what we've seen Jaden do. He's been spectacular. But there are a lot of other guys on that group that are shining and making him look really good. And Bryce Young.
I was going to say, even Bryce Young, even though obviously Alabama doesn't look like Alabama, Bryce Young's still cool, calm, and collected. Okay, let's go to this day in Heisman history, November 23rd, 1991. And we know this guy. His name is Desmond Howard.
There he is.
Takes this
Hello,
punt,
Michigan.
93 yards to the house, caps it off with, of course, we've all seen it, that iconic Heisman pose. He ended up winning the Heisman over Peyton Manning, and they won that game 31-3. All right, now let's take a look at some of the Week 13 matchups with Heisman implications. Of course, as we've mentioned, the game at 12 noon Eastern on Saturday, pitting CJ Stroud against Blake Corum. A CFP berth perhaps on the line for the winner. And now, number 6 USC and Caleb Williams will play host to Notre Dame. They are number 15. Max Duggan's undefeated TCU squad takes on last place Iowa State. Jaden Daniels is on the road against the Aggies. And finally, Bo Nix and Oregon take on Oregon State in a rivalry game that could send the Ducks to the Pac-12 championship game with a dub. And with that, we welcome in Drew Carter, who's like smiling already.
Yeah.
Hey, dude.
Happy to be here. I've been smiling ever since I sat down.
Of course, because you get to hang out with us. Yeah. Let's talk about one of those matchups, the game. A lot of people obviously know there's a lot on the line for Blake Corum, for CJ Stroud. What are you looking at in this matchup when it comes to those two?
Yeah, well, first of all, what an amazing game. And we're so excited. I mean, it's called the game for a reason.
Right.
But I think from a Heisman perspective, I feel like this is all about CJ Stroud. We don't even know if Blake Corum is playing, guys.
True.
I mean, their offensive lineman, Ryan Hayes, said he's a great player, but everyone else is going to step up with him out. One of the Michigan players said that. And Jim Harbaugh, I'm sure, was like fuming in the background, like we weren't going to tell them that he wasn't playing.
But was it on purpose? Just
See,
to
that's
throw
the
off?
thing.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You don't
now
know.
we're talking maybe
you don't know.
Psychology. Who knows if he's going to play?
Mind games. Got to in a week like this.
I do think that Stroud is the guy here, though, because he's already the favorite, like y'all have talked about. Michigan has the best defense in the country from a total defense perspective. I feel like if Stroud puts up a big game and they win, they're going to be in the playoff, and he'll probably be the favorite.
If he's able to do it on that stage, it will be a big deal, and I think a lot of questions will be answered. We have been giving today a lot of love to Caleb Williams, as we should, and as we maybe should have last week after the game that we just saw from him. How are you feeling about Caleb right now?
I feel like Caleb is my pick as of now.
Ooh,
here's a guy with 40 total touchdowns this year, tied for most in the country. You see what he did against UCLA in a big-time rivalry game. Missing their running back Travis Dye in that game, and Williams just went full Superman, put the team on his shoulders. I feel like Caleb Williams is a lot like Lululemon, guys, where it's like you really have to spring for it, but you get what you pay for.
Wow.
You get what you were expecting.
Oh my God.
I'm not implying that anyone was paid to go to USC. I'm certainly not doing that.
No,
they definitely, him or Jordan Addison, definitely didn't get what they paid for per se. But they definitely got what they were expecting with Caleb Williams.
It would be worth the
money. If they did, they wouldn't be returning the product like with Lululemon. So Caleb Williams, to me, should be the favorite. And keep in mind, before the Bama guys went back-to-back the last 2 years, 3 straight transfers won the Heisman. 2 of them played for Lincoln Riley, just at a different school. So could Lincoln Riley do it again?
That's true. And Lincoln Riley, when he was at Oklahoma, was called quarterback U. Like, they obviously have been churning out a ton of quarterbacks over there. We've seen them, as you mentioned. I do want to say that when we were looking at this is the first time that I thought about this all show, but the fact that we had Caleb Williams at number 5, I feel like we're like jinxing people, but like also in the opposite direction, because I had Hendon at number 1 and then Drake May. Like, I'm just thinking about it. I just hope we're not jinxing people. That's like the one thing that I don't want to happen. Dark horses. Who do you have as dark horses as we look at the Heisman race?
Okay, I've got a whole list of dark horses. I came really prepared because I want to give some guys some love who don't normally get it.
Give them their flowers.
Let's do all 5. Let's start with Michael Penix from Washington.
Yeah.
I like that.
I feel like has not been mentioned at all this season as a Heisman contender. Leads the country in passing yards per game by a lot, by like 25 yards per game. Michael Penix, I love watching this guy. He's a lefty, so much fun to watch. Indiana transfer. Washington, of course, has the huge win at Oregon on the road. Still a chance for them to get in the Pac-12 championship. I love watching Michael Penix play. Jalen Hyatt, all right, so Hendon Hooker's out for the season now.
True.
That really sucks. Hyatt's leading the country with 15 touchdowns. No one thought he'd be their number 1 wide receiver. They thought it'd be Cedric Tillman. Chase Brown's leading the country in rushing, playing for Illinois. They could still get in the Big Ten championship. They need some chaos to happen, but we're talking about dark horses who could potentially win it. If Chase Brown has a huge game this weekend, if they get into the Big Ten championship, if they play Ohio State or Michigan, he goes nuts. Maybe we see another running back win it.
Jalen Hyatt's game against Alabama, obviously that game doesn't look as good today as it did when they actually played, but like that could be a Heisman moment for sure when you think about
100%.
it.
Like, I actually tweeted during that game that Hendon Hooker has to be careful if he keeps throwing to Jalen Hyatt. Hyatt's going to pass him in the Heisman ranking, right? And so, you know, the vibes around Tennessee are not great right now with the injury and the loss. But Jalen Hyatt's season has been amazing. And like I said, he wasn't even their top guy coming in.
Right.
That was Cedric Tillman. Tillman goes down with an injury. Hyatt steps in, and he's been amazing.
All right, Drew. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. Have you been having fun?
So
okay,
much
good.
fun.
So maybe come back another time. Thank you guys for watching the Heisman Show.
Thank
Thank you guys for watching the Heisman Show presented by Nissan, premier partner of the Heisman Trophy. We will see you guys next week.
See ya.